Hello folks, what's up? This is Weeps from SlideNet over here. In this video, we are going to talk about the grid layout in Android. If you guys remember, the grid layout is a new layout which was released in API level 14 or your Android ice cream sandwich, which is version 4.0. In this video, we are going to discuss about the basics of the grid layout, and in the next video, we are going to talk about the advanced controls, or you can see customization of your grid layout. So for those of you who are new to a grid layout, what is a grid layout? That's the first question you have. Very simple. You arrange views in terms of rows and columns, just like your HTML table tag, if you guys have ever used it from an HTML background, or even if you are not from an HTML background, don't worry too much about it. It's simply arranging stuff inside rows and columns. So what you have to specify the number of rows and columns you want inside the grid layout. Now remember, in the table layout which you guys have seen, there was a way to specify rows. You don't need to do that here. Android takes care of everything automatically for you guys. You just have to specify how many rows you want and how many columns you want with these two attributes, which is Android row count and Android column count, inside your grid layout tag in XML layout file. You can also control if a view takes more than one row, which is spanning multiple rows, and you can also take control if a view takes more than one column in size, and that is about spanning multiple columns. You can also control which row, which column the view is placed inside. Now remember, every column and every row has an index over here, just like arrays. This one, if you see column 1, it is actually the 0th column. This is the first column, this is the second column, and this is the first, this is the 0th row, and below that you have row 2 column 1, which is actually inside the first row. It's just like arrays, starting from 0 for the column numbers and row numbers. Multiple views can be inside the same column. Now this is a unique feature of your grid layout. Things can overlap and you have to be careful about where you're placing what. You don't have to specify the width and height for any view which is inside your grid layout. By default, everything is wrap content in width and wrap content in height. But the problem is, if you're using Android Studio, it is gonna probably give you an error saying you need to define the width and height. But you can go ahead and try this out in Android Developer Tools or Eclipse. I'm sure it may or may not give an error. I'm not sure about that. You guys can check it out. So next step, how to define rows and columns inside a grid layout. Let's say you want to make a grid layout, you want to arrange stuff inside a table on your user interface in your Android device. Let's see how to do that first. You define this grid layout tag in your XML, and here what I have is my grid layout opening and closing tag, and there you can see there is nothing on the screen. This is the first step where I say the number of rows by specifying Android row count equals to 2. That means I say I want 2 rows and I want 3 columns, and that's what I do over here. Next step, what I do is I simply add the views inside. As you guys can see over here, it's the same grid layout which I've defined in the last slide which you guys saw, and here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 text views, each of them having a text which says I am R0, C0, R0, C1, C2, and so on, right? Now as you guys can see, again, there's a layout height and layout width of wrap content defined for each of them. You don't need to define them because they are wrap content by default, but for Android Studio I've done this because it gives an error otherwise. So now here, just to make things a bit more clear, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give background colors to each of those text views which you saw in the last slide. So here, if you guys notice, I have some weird colors, EDF, DEF, and so on, all possible combinations of E, D, and F, those 3 letters. I have used them as colors over here, and as you guys can see, each text view has a different background color, and that exactly gives us an idea of how big the text view is and where it is being placed inside the column. As you guys can see, this is column 0, 1, 2, and this is row 0 and row 1, right? So now let's talk about spacing between views. How can we add extra spaces if we want to add stuff, right? So here, if you guys notice, I have my first column in the diagram over here, and what have I done over here? There is 10 dp from all 4 sides. Now what is that? It's simple, it's a margin. If you guys can take a look over here, I've written Android layout margin equals to 10 dp on the first text view, and what that does is places 10 dp of space outside the text view surrounding it, right? If you guys remember, in one of my videos on my playlist, I've talked about what is a margin and what is a padding and what is the difference between them. If you guys are confused about that, you can go ahead and check it out on my playlist. It's right there. So this is one of the ways you can give spaces between views. Alright, now let's see the other ways over here. So in my second way, what I have is I have the same piece of code, but instead of writing margins everywhere and making things look dirty, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do this option which says Android default margins equals to true. Now remember, your Android version, depending on what version you're using and what device you're using, there is already a value for a default margin. You can just apply it to all the views inside, and as you guys can see, all the views are separated by some default space. I think it's about 5 dp. I'm not sure about that. You guys can see what it looks like, right? And then let's talk about how to skip a column. So now let us consider a case where I have a column and I want to keep it empty. I don't want any view inside that. Now how can I do that? Now there are many ways to do that again, but this is one of the ways you can do it. As you guys can see over here in the diagram, I have row 0 column 0. Then row 0 column 1 is actually appearing inside column number 2. If you remember, column 0 is this one, column 1 is this, column 2 is this, and that's where your column 1 actually appears. And I have left an empty space over here. So how did I do that? Very simple. I used this space view, which is a special type of view for leaving spaces, or you can say keeping things blank. You can use this inside your grid layout. So here you have your layout width of wrap content for it and your layout height of wrap content for that, and that's all you need to write. What happens then is your text view, which is seen here first, is actually placed inside the 0th column. Then your space, which is considered as a separate view, is placed inside your first column. And then you have the other text view which goes inside the second column, and that's why things look like this on the screen. So I hope you guys have understood something about the basics of grid layout. In the next video, I'm going to talk about the most advanced properties of grid layout, like positioning and sizing and so on. So if you guys like what you saw, please subscribe to my channel, comment, let me know your thoughts. Check me out on Facebook, where I talk about the hottest trends of Android currently in place. And I'll catch you guys later. Have a nice day.